Hey friends, as we head into another weekend, it's time for another daily briefing, and I've got a lot I want to talk to you about today. I want to tell you what we're going to do this Sunday, I want to tell you what we're going to do in future Sundays, and I want to end with a little bit of perspective on how we live with wisdom in the current moment. So let's take a little journey. Join me. This Sunday, we're going to take the next iteration of our parking lot service, and that is this. We're going to have a lawn chair service. Bring a chair or a blanket. We're going to get out of our cars and we're going to gather around the stage we've built in the parking lot and worship Jesus outdoors. We're going to ask you to drive in and park down here in one of the West Side school lots. Take out your lawn chair or your blanket and bring it up to the Cormdale parking lot where we'll gather for worship. And by the way, if you're still the kind of person who wants to join us but you want to stay in your car and use the FM radio, you can still do that too. And we'll ask you to park along the West Side School building so you can get a good FM signal. This is our plan for the next 3 weeks, is to do a lawn chair service here in the parking lot. The only downside to that plan is weather. That could obviously complicate it. I can tell you this Sunday, it's supposed to feel about like this, 50 degrees and cool. So it's not gonna feel like you're sitting outside in shorts in the sunshine enjoying the worship service. It's probably gonna be more like you have a jacket on and maybe you're sitting on a blanket. We gotta make the best we can of it for the next 3 weeks. So we're gathering outside. Bring whatever you're gonna need to stay comfortable for an hour as we worship Jesus together. So for the next 3 Sundays, we're gonna worship outdoors. And then on May 31st, the last Sunday of May, we're gonna have our first gathering right back here in our building. And I wanna talk to you a little bit about how we're going to approach that. I'm standing here in the back of our sanctuary, and you can see the maximum occupancy, if we add up worship space and balcony, is 546 people. Our architects explained to me that the way that number is calculated is to assume a radius of 3 feet for every human being. So, to create a 6-foot radius to follow social distancing guidelines, we need to cut that occupancy in half. What that means is, if we cut that number in half, 275 people can safely be in this room. Now we're going to shrink that even further because we want to be extra safe, and so we're going to cap the occupancy of this room at 225 people on May 31st and into the month of June as we continue to explore how those regulations are going to continue to roll out. So 225 people will be allowed in the sanctuary, and then 125 people will be allowed downstairs in the fellowship hall. The capacity of that room is 250. So we're cutting each room in half to allow for a 6-foot radius around each person, and we're going to trust you then to be adults. So what I'm not going to do is walk around with a measuring tape and make sure there's exactly 6 feet between you and the next family unit. I'm just going to trust that you know how to spread out in a room and that you'll come and leave a reasonable space between your family or your person and the next family unit or person sitting near you. As we do that together on May 31st, we should be able to gather 225 people here in the sanctuary and 125 people downstairs for a total of 350 per service. So on May 31st, we'll go back to 2 services, one at 9 a.m. and one at 11 a.m. And remember, there will be no kids ministry of any kind. So your kids will have to be with you in the service. We anticipate that if we do 2 services with a capacity of 350 per service, that allows us to gather 700 people safely for worship. And our church, if we count adults and kids, is about 1,000. So that's about 60 to 70% of our church can gather together. It's not everyone, but we also assume there's those of you who aren't going to choose to come yet, either because you want to be a little more conservative or because you have really, really little kids and it's going to feel like that'd be hard. And so we hope that by taking that simple step at the end of May and into June to worship in 2 services in a socially distanced kind of way, we can take a step back toward what feels like a normal worship gathering for our church. I want you to know about those plans and that May 31st date now, so you can begin planning for that and getting ready for that. And my hope is that we'll come back together with enthusiasm, that there'll be a joyful spirit of the joy that we get to gather back together here. Now, I also hope that we'll love one another well. Some of you guys are going to show up on May 31st and you're ready to go for the full frontal hug because you haven't seen anyone in 8 weeks, but it's not time for that yet, all right? So even as we get back together, we're going to have to be honoring of one another, paying attention to the fact that we still have to minimize our contact with one another, and we can't interact as we normally would. And so I'm going to trust you to be adult human beings who can manage your own behavior. And I'm not going to be a nanny state policeman trying to measure the distance between you and other people. But I do want to encourage us to be careful that we honor one another. I realize we're going to be coming from all kinds of different places on the spectrum about what we're comfortable with and not comfortable with. And so let's just be careful to try to ease back in slowly and honor one another. And again, part of the reason that we're meeting outdoors for the next 3 weeks is because of everything I've read, outdoor transmission of this virus is almost to zero. So outdoors is a very, very, very safe place for us to be. And obviously it's a lot easier for us to sort of have 6 feet of distance between family units when we have a huge parking lot to do that in. All right, so that'll give us a chance to sort of feel this out for 3 weeks together before we move back in to our main worship space. Let me close this video then with a little bit of perspective for you on how we want to live with wisdom over the next few weeks. As you know, this week is the first week that sort of economic and social life has opened back up a little bit. Some businesses are open. I got my hair cut this week. Restaurants are open in some places. And so here's what you should expect to see. You're going to see an increase in coronavirus cases. Why? Because more people are going out and about, and because we've dramatically increased testing in Nebraska. And so the more people we test, the more we're going to find cases of coronavirus. Those numbers are going to go up. You should not allow that to alarm you. Here's why. As I mentioned a week ago, the best analysis of the case fatality rate for coronavirus disease is 1 in 100 people. What that means is 99 out of 100 of you that get the coronavirus are going to recover just fine. You're going to have mild to medium symptoms, and it's going to be okay. So I'm not suggesting we should try to get sick or that we should be flippant in our approach to this disease, but I am saying we should treat it with an appropriate amount of weight. Part of biblical wisdom is acknowledging what the actual risk is. And so you should just expect, hey, we're going to see cases go up. That's not something to be alarmed about. We have good capacity. And if we start getting to the place where our medical capacity starts to get tested, I'm sure we'll see another round of measures to sort of squelch some of our interaction and put the virus back down. All right. And so we can trust our local public health officials to let us know when that time comes. Here's what I want to encourage you about. 2 things are kind of weighing on me as a pastor. Number one, I don't want us to get to the place in our hearts where we start treating other human beings as dangerous. And that's the thing to me that is a little unsettling about all of this, is that it can lead me to think, oh man, I better avoid people because people are a danger to me. There's obviously a sense in which that's true. There's a sense in which part of what we have to do is stay distant from each other. But man, let's not let that turn in our hearts to a sense of fear of people, or a sense that people themselves are a danger to me. That would really kill our love for one another and our ability to be a community. The second thing I want to urge you toward is just, hey, I can't actually guarantee you that there's zero risk to you in coming back to church. Part of what we're all going to have to embrace, and I've been saying this for weeks, is, hey, when society starts to go back to normal, any place we go, we're carrying some amount of risk with us. And I know there are some of you out there that would like me to be able to guarantee you that we can do worship without any risk to anyone. And I just can't promise you that. You're going to be in a room with other people. We're going to take all the precautions that we can to keep distance from one another and to practice all the good public health wisdom that we've heard about. But at the end of the day, there's some risk that's on all of us as we gather back together. And so there's some way in which biblical wisdom needs to allow us to embrace that risk and to also acknowledge, hey, there's some in our church community that because they're very, very high risk for infection, they're going to need to spend further time away before coming back to church. And that's great. And if you're one of those people, we love you and we hope to see you again soon. But we realize that there's reasons why you might need to stay away. We're working right now on increased ways to make our services available online so that you don't have to miss anything, all right? So even as we move back toward gathering together as a church, we're also trying to move toward continuing to make our services available to other people who can't join us, okay? So let's try to live with wisdom in the coming weeks. Let's pray for God's grace on our state and on our city and on our country as we continue to move forward. Let's reject alarmism and panic. Yep, things are opening back up. That brings with it some increased risk. We're going to be all right. We have good people around us. We have good public health measures in place. The Douglas County Health Department is recruiting new folks to test and trace and do contact tracing. We're making really good steps locally to move into a different phase of dealing with this virus. And so I'm hopeful as a pastor that that will help increase both our comfort level and our joy and freedom in gathering back together as a church. All right, so thanks for watching this briefing. I'll look forward to seeing you in the parking lot on Sunday as we continue in the parables of Jesus.